All right, we've already figured out how to do this. The beds match up perfectly.
And here's the thing, it'll give us so much extra space in our room to do activities.
Please say yes.
You don't need permission from us to build
Rankings.
You're adults. You can do what you want.
So...
What is up? Welcome into Adjust the Ranks, presented by the Double FU, the FU times 2, the fantasy football universe. I, of course, am Jeremy Schulman, and this is our special guest for today. We'll get to him in just a second, but we have to take care of a little bit of business first, because once we start talking to David, we're not going to want to stop. A couple of things quick. First, we have a link. We just opened up our Discord today. So if you want to jump in our Discord, talk a bunch of ball with the fantasy football universe and all our guys, Jesse Moeller, SC Romero, Mike Anthony, and the rest of us, Rich, of course, please jump in there. And look, we're not selling you anything in the Discord at the moment, but certainly we just want to kind of form a community and talk a little bit of ball. And of course, if you like this show, if you like the previous shows, we got an amazing lineup, not excluding David, of course, but we got JJ Zacharyson on Wednesday. We got Tom, we got Andrew Erickson, we got the FFU team, and we're still working on bringing in a bunch of guests throughout the offseason to help you understand the dynasty landscape, rookie mock drafts. We'll get into redraft, all of that. So that's the business. Now let's get to the enjoyable part. We have David Gautieri at Guru, Fantasy World on Twitter. David, how you doing today, man?
Man, I'm doing well. I'm excited. It's officially April. It's draft month, so we're almost there.
Yeah, I love it, man. And, seeing people like yourself in the Twitter streets and everybody else coming out with their takes, which I highly respect. I love them. And I love to see kind of the disparity between, what different guys think at this stage in the offseason. For example, we have some guys, myself included, who are not the biggest Luther Burden fans. I think I have Treylon Burks, PTSD, you know what I mean? Not that they're the same player, but they have similar production concerns, I guess, in terms of the way they're used. But of course, you, sir, have been beating the Luther Burden drum on Twitter. So I guess we can start there. Can you convince myself and other people why we're ridiculous for fading Luther Burden?
Yeah, for me, there's so many things that just point to Luther Burden being a good player. And for me, I try to gather notes on every rookie from the start of their college career all the way through the end. And that means I'm looking at things like their recruiting grade. I'm looking at whether they were an early producer. I'm looking at whether they were an early declare. Obviously, draft capital is going to be the biggest one for us. And that's a little bit of a question mark for Luther Burden as well. We've seen him kind of mocked in the late first, but there are also a lot of mocks where he's not even a first round pick. So to me, that's a little bit crazy when I look at all the things that Luther Burden has done. When I look at his profile, I would expect him to be a late first round pick, especially when we talk about what he did at the combine, 4.4 140 at 6 foot 206. Like,
Monster.
He is an NFL sized receiver with NFL athleticism. And you look at his college career, right? He is one of very few players to be a 5-star recruit, to post 1,200 plus yards as a freshman or sophomore, and then to declare early and get drafted round 1 in the NFL draft. We have basically Jamar Chase, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Luther Burden. That's it in the past 15 years, since 2010. 5-star recruit, 1,200 plus yards, early declare, round 1 draft pick. So we look at players who came in as a highly regarded player, who produced at a high level, declare early and drafted in round 1 is Chase, JSN, and Luther Burden. And we talk about Trump traits, right? Like, does a player have an elite trait? A lot of that stuff, when you look back at classes, all right, guys that broke out, like, say, Devon Achane, for example, Sam Laporta, who had elite speed for a tight end, like guys who have an elite trait for their position. Luther Burden has an elite trait. And to me, it's the tackle breaking ability, the ability with the ball in his hands, and the ability in the open field, and that stop-start quickness that he has. So he led the NCAA in broken tackles amongst wide receivers last year with 30. He did it on just 61 receptions.
Not bad.
Which is insane to lead the NCAA on just 61 receptions and broken tackles. He's the only player in PFF history to have 30 plus broken tackles as wide receiver on 80 or fewer receptions. So this is a guy who is absolutely dynamic with the ball in his hands. He's also really good in contested situations down the field. He has good ball skills. He was at 54.5% and 56.5% success rate on contested catches in his 2 seasons as starter. So that's above average, above 50%. And 50% is not even average. 50% is already like above average. So to see him do that in 2 years, we have the elite athleticism of 4.41. We have the elite tackle breaking ability. We have the ball skills down the field. The question everyone asks is he just a gadget player? Like, is he just a guy who got these easy touches and then had these manufactured touches and can't do the actual wide receiver stuff? You know, you see the knock on him, his screen rate, his slot fade rate, which is now apparently a bad thing to be good on slot fades. Don't tell Malik Neighbors. But apparently that's a bad thing too. Then you look at his reception perception profile, and that doesn't seem to be a concern at all for certainly a professional who does this for a living. Matt Harmon has Luther Burden graded at 68th, 55th, and I think 59th percentile against man, zone, and press. So he is in the upper 1/3 of route runners against man, which is good. That's a higher success rate than Tet McMillan, Igbuka, Matthew Golden, Jaden Higgins, all of these other guys whose profiles have been posted. The only guy who's been posted with a higher success rate first man is Travis Hunter. That's it. We're still waiting on, a profile from like Jalen Noel, some of the second tier guys. But it's Luther Burden as the best guy first man. So I see him as a route runner. I see him as an elite athlete, as an elite after the catch threat. Like, I see him with an elite ceiling, kind of like a guy like Garrett Wilson, who can kind of do it all. And Garrett Wilson obviously is disappointed a little bit. But I think another comp for me would be like a Percy Harvin. If Percy Harvin avoided the injuries a little bit. Yeah, he's going to play out of the slot a lot. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing. You look at some of these receivers who were productive last year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb was like over 50% in the slot. We have Rashee Rice, JSN. The list goes on of players who are playing in the slot. So that doesn't have to be a bad thing for me. I just see him as the highest upside wide receiver in this class other than Travis Hunter.
I love that. And happy weekend to you, Jamie. We have a lot of Burden stands in the chat here. So we absolutely love that take. I think I'm going to have to reevaluate and get over my Treylon Burks disaster that was a few years ago, simply because of, like you mentioned, that production, that he's closer to the line of scrimmage. But you mentioned Percy Harvin. That's an interesting thing. I think it was Matt Waldman. I listened to too much stuff, so it could have been someone else. But mentioning that if Percy Harvin were playing in the modern NFL today, his situation, production profile, his career could have been a whole lot different, the way they just moved these players in and out of the slot, as you were referencing. So something really interesting to consider with Luther Burden. The athleticism there, we saw it on display. And the thing that, like you said, he's getting knocked on, can he run routes? And overwhelmingly, this is what I hear from the community. Yes, he can. Get over it and just draft Luther Burden. Let's move on quickly to just talk one more about Travis Hunter. As you mentioned, we don't need to get too deep into it, but where do you have him ranked right now? I know there's a lot of uncertainty. We hear a lot that he's the best wide receiver in this draft. Will he play wide receiver? What's happening? Where do you have Travis Hunter ranked?
It's so hard right now. I do not envy people who do their rookie drafts before the NFL draft this year, because it is so hard. And I literally have one league like that where we do that. We do the rookie draft before the NFL draft. Literally starts today. I have the 103 pick in that draft. And I'm literally facing that conundrum because it's tough. If Travis Hunter goes to the Patriots and he's looking like their number one wide receiver, he's going to be the 102. He's going to be the consensus 102, especially if we get a commitment from them that they're going to play him primarily offensive side of the ball. And people are going to start putting him in the same conversation as Genty if we get a hard wide receiver commitment. So But then it's like, all right, what if he goes to the Giants and they're like, all right, he's a two-way player. He's going to be behind Malik Neighbors. It's like, all right, maybe push him down a little bit, maybe 105, 106, 106. It's like, all right, I don't know. Like, I have a giant lump after 101 where it's basically 102 through 109. And I have all these guys like basically ranked right on top of each other. Like you have to go down the line, like back to back to back. But it feels like they're right on top of each other. I'm like, I don't know which. Every day I wake up different, and I'm like, do I put TreVeyon Henderson above Tyler Warren? Do I put above this wide receiver? Do I put just the wide receivers alone are hard to rank? Burden and Ibuka for me. Those are all same tier guys for me. So, and Travis Hunter again, you throw him in the mix. Goodness, I'm glad I don't have to make that decision until after the NFL draft in most of these.
Absolutely. And we hope the NFL draft helps and those NFL teams help us to make some of those decisions. Of course, a lot of this will change. We'll have to see where guys land. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we get into the draft and at the end. So first, we'll do something that based on what I was reading on your Twitter account, you absolutely hate, but we're going to do it anyway, is we are going to spin the picker wheel, not a pickerwheel.com, not a sponsor. And we are going to determine kind of where we are in our dynasty setup here. Of course, we're drafting in vacuums. We like to choose the best players and rank them. At the same time, we do not draft in vacuums in a dynasty league. So I'm going to ask you, David, and we'll see what you end up with. Are you choosing to spin the wheel first, or would you like to defer?
What do you mean this is something I would hate? I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll tell you. Why don't I spin the wheel, and I'll talk about it a little bit. So this will be for me. But what I noticed on your Twitter is you were, I think it might even be your pinned tweet, is that you were mentioning that best player available is always the way to go in rookie drafts. So can talk a little bit about that as I get best player available, which of course, hey, you could be in any situation. This is a pretty good strategy to have. What do you think about drafting the best player available versus like drafting for need, especially in rookie drafts?
Well, I think a lot of the times multiple things can be true, right? Like we as humans, we want to classify things as being against each other. Like if it's not this, it's something else. True. Or if it's this, it can't be something else. Like it can be both. Like you can prioritize best player available as your number one like pillar, like your number one strategy piece. All right, I want to take the best player available. I don't want to take players just because I have a need at that position. Sure. But again, we also talk about tier-based drafting and talk about like that tier where right now for me it's 102 to 108. There are other tiers like 203 to 207. Like I don't necessarily have strong opinions on player versus player versus player where I know exactly which player I even think is the best player available. So sometimes when you're drafting in tiers, you do want to kind of lean towards a position need, or evaluate what positions are your league values more. So it definitely matters to consider your positional needs as well.
For sure.
But again, you don't want to go outside of your tier. Like I don't want to pass up on a tier 1 wide receiver because I need a running back and take a tier 2 running back. Like ask people who took Quinshon Vaughn years ago, Trey Benson over Ladd McConkey I've seen in some drafts last year. Like, so they're just Blake Corum over McConkey I had in my home league draft. My friend Cody, I'm trying to tell him, I'm like, don't do this. Base hit rate's not good. Round 3 versus upper round 2, not a good idea. And but once you're doing it within tiers, like Omarion Hampton, for example, like he's going to be possibly the 102 for some people. I don't necessarily have a disagreement against that. Versus, Cam Ward might be, technically the most valuable player there. It depends how close they are in value. If it's just a minor value gap, you can just go with the guy who's actually going to help your team more.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree with that. I mean, you talk about home leagues as well. My home league a few years ago, a guy took Dameon Pierce at the 104. This was, of course, later in the process because, he was getting that camp hype, and the home leagues tend to draft in August with the rookies. Dameon Pierce 104. Obviously, you have to be really careful about how those things go. But, hey, you live and you learn. David, do you want to spin wheel number 1 here or the special wheel I made for you, wheel number 2? Which one do you feel?
Oh, you made a special wheel for me. We got to spin that one. I can't just say, go back to wheel number 1.
You're fine. I wonder what you're going to get here as we spin this wheel for you. It's going to be best player available. Congratulations.
Good. Good.
So you're good to go, man. And we're going to fire up this draft right away. Any thoughts here as you head in? I just need to switch up the link so we get the correct thing popped up here. But any pre-draft thoughts headed in, looking at best player available? You're drafting from the 106 in this draft. What are you thinking about how the first round might shake out, and who are you looking for at that pick?
This is a spot I would probably want to trade back. I like where I'm going to be in the second round, in around the 206 range. Once you get to the third round, it's wild west, especially pre-draft. We don't know which players are going to get the draft capital, which aren't at that point. Never mind the landing spots and the actual like depth chart situation. So anything can happen after that point. But round one, I'm going to be forced to make a decision because there's going to be a couple players I'm going to have to choose from. So we'll see who I land on.
I love it. With that said, let's fire it up here again. Let's see if I can scroll it across the screen. I can. We have a Superflex tight end premium 4-round rookie mock draft. We're going 60 seconds per pick. We got the entire draft populated with a bunch of guys who wanted to be here. So hopefully everybody is still able to make it. We will fire it up here right now. And as we watch a few guys go off the board, David, let us know what you're thinking. I'm assuming Genty won, but then like you said, it's going to be this glut of guys here in the middle between Cam Ward, maybe Shadir Sanders sneaks in to the middle of this draft, depending on where we're assuming he's drafted. We got some wide receivers, the big running back class. So as we get Cam Ward 102, what are you thinking here about the initial picks and how it's shaping up for you?
Cam Ward's a tough one for me. I mean, the rushing upside is not super high. He's a fifth-year player who had basically one really good season. The first four were smaller school, you know, I think Washington State, and then I forget the first one he played at. But he only had one season above 9 yards per attempt. So it's just a little bit sketchy for me. I feel like, especially with quarterbacks, it's a high bust rate position. I feel like there's some really good players in this class who deserve the 102 as well. I talked about Hampton, Hunter, even Warren, I think. I mean,
sure.
If you're a Ted McMillan guy, you could argue him as well. So it's tough for me to take the player who I think is most likely to bust at 102. That's why I really want to try and trade back. Let's see what I'm going to do here. I think I'm going to do something just to make things spicy here, because if he already went Travis Hunter. Never mind. I'm not even going to be the spicy guy. I'm going to go running back over the wide receivers here because I think TreVeyon Henderson is going to be a late first, early second round prospect. And to me, he's another one of those guys where we look at the recruiting through the end of his college career. This is a guy who came in as a 5-star prospect with a 99 prospect grade. Produced as a true freshman at Ohio State on a team that was just absolutely loaded with weapons. He passes the athleticism test. His yards after contact numbers are good. He's capable as a receiver. The draft capital, obviously, I said it's going to be there. So there's really like no ding on him other than obviously he went back for his senior season. You would have liked to see him be an early declare. But this guy's about as clean as a prospect as you're going to get. And I like these wide receivers, but I think Ted McMillan, there's some debate about whether he's more of a number one or a number two. We talked about the reception perception profile. Harmon had him at, I think, 60th. Let me pull it up right now so I can actually quote it. But he's a little bit 60th percentile versus man, I remember off the top of my head, which is good, but it's certainly not like the Drake London level prospects. I believe Harmon himself referred to as a tier 2 prospect for him. Let me get the phone numbers here, but he's really good against press. He's a good yards after contact guard as well. I talked about Luther Burden's tackle breaking ability. Ted McMillan had 29 broken tackles in his final college season. Obviously on more volume than Luther Burden, but he's a good yards after contact threat. He can get past people in the open field. 59th, 60th, and 80th percentile versus man zone and press. So 59th and 60th versus man and zone. That's kind of where you see the concerns a little bit about the separation ability. But again, those are above average. They're just not like he's not an elite separator.
Right. And so, well, let's compare Tet to Luther Burden. Do you see Burden as a wide receiver one for a team immediately or eventually, or is this whole class maybe outside of Hunter just full of wide receivers, maybe including Hunter?
I think it's very similar debate to Tet. Again, this is why I have these guys in the same tier pre-draft for me. Like if we see Tet McMillan say go top 10 and Luther Burden falls to round 2, they're gonna separate for me. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna put Tet above. But I think they're kind of in the same tier where you could kind of argue that maybe they're a wide receiver 2, maybe they have wide receiver 1 upside. For me, it's more about that elite trait with Luther Burden. Like I can see him with the higher ceiling because he has that elite trait as just start quickness. He is really quick and really fast, and that's important to be an elite player in the NFL. So you see some of these quick twitch movements from him. Then we talk about, okay, better versus man than Tet here. Like also good again above 50th percentile versus man versus zone and press. And then obviously the tackle breaking ability. And he's also good in contested situations down the field. So I feel like he can do a lot of the things Tet can, and then he can do a little bit more as well.
I love that. And we see how the first round shook out. So I'm going to go through it and let's talk about it. So Genty, Ward, Hampton, pretty much consensus. You might see a little bit of a swap there, but those three are probably going first. Maybe Tet's in there. You got Travis Hunter at 4. He keeps rising up boards over the last month. He even, I believe he said himself that you didn't see him backpedal at his pro day the other day, talking about the idea that he would potentially like to be a wide receiver or at least, play both ways. We'll see how that shakes out and how the team decides to use him. We got Tyler Warren at the 105, TreVeyon Henderson. Absolutely love him. And he lays dudes out in pass pro in the backfield, which is also a plus, going to keep him on the field. Tet 107, Emeka Egbuka, Quinshon Judkins. So we got teammates there. Luther Burden, who we've been talking about all show at the 110. Then we got a couple of quarterbacks to round out the end of the draft. David, usually I'm taking Colston Loveland here, especially in a tight end premium. Usually I'm taking Matthew Golden because I think those guys are locks at this point to go in the first round. I also think Jackson Dart has a really, really, really good chance to go in the first round, whether a team trades back up into the first, but he's my quarterback 3. I don't think it's really that close because of the project that Milroe appears to be. How do you feel about Jackson Dart and Sanders here, especially in Superflex leagues where we know these guys are coming in? They're more than likely getting some nice draft capital, and they should be starting sooner rather than later for NFL teams, or at least get the chance.
Yeah, Jackson Dart, you could argue, has the most fantasy-friendly skill set of the top 3 quarterbacks between Ward, Sanders, and Dart. Just look at rushing attempts per game. We have Ward at 4.7 rushing attempts per game, Sanders 5.1, Dart at 7.4. So he's got a little bit more ability as a rusher. You could argue him as a better fantasy prospect than Shedeur Sanders. The question again is going to be, where does he land in the NFL draft? I think Loveland as well. I agree he's a top 12 pick for me, especially in tight end premium. I think you could argue him over those quarterbacks there, arguably both of them. I love Luther Burden at 110. I think that's just going to be one of my favorite picks in the draft. Like if you can get into the 110 range, up from like the 204 to like beyond, and get into that 110 to 202, 203, and maybe get a Loveland or a Dart who falls, because I feel like it is a big drop off now. Like once Colston, Loveland, and I think Caleb Johnson should be behind Loveland. I think I would take Loveland ahead of him. Caleb's more of like a 3rd round mock pick right now on Mock Draft Database. They have him as a 3rd round pick on the consensus big board. So he's not even for sure going to be drafted in the 2nd round. Loveland, he's getting drafted round 1. The question is how high. So I think he should be above Caleb Johnson there. I'm right here. Looks like I'm on the board here. I like where I am in the mid 2nd round here with some of these wide receivers prospects. I think they're going to be between Trey Harris, Noel, Higgins. Even if you're worried about the reception perception profile for Higgins, I think he's going to get drafted high enough in the NFL draft where he will hold value this offseason and be like a player that you can trade potentially, especially if he gets camp hype, who you can kind of flip. So I like using a pick on him. But for me, it's going to be Jalen Noel here, who I'm going to take He's a guy who looks like a very clean wide receiver prospect to me all around when we talk about he has production early on in his career as well. He was a second target, first or second target on his team by his freshman or sophomore season. Talk about the athleticism. Obviously, he just blew the roof off at the combine. He was basically the leader in like vertical jump, broad jump, also like in the 4.3s versus 40. Just a very, very good athlete as well. And then we talk about the draft capital. He seems like a lock for at worst like second round draft capital at this point. I don't think he's falling to round 3, potentially maybe late round 1 even. But I would say he's probably going to be a second round. To me, he comps kind of to guys like Jaden Reed and Josh Downs, where maybe they're secondary targets. They're a little smaller. Like Noel's, like I believe 5'10", 184. But he's still not super small. He's not Tank Dell size, but he's not like a huge player. But these guys can be productive. They're going to be hits for a mid to late second round pick, especially if we see some of these other guys go ahead and you get Noel and, anywhere after 206.
Yeah. Totally agree, and I think you had the take as well. Noel over Higgins, you're doubling down on that here in this draft, and I think that makes a ton of sense, especially like you referenced what he did at the combine. You see in the second round here, we have Golden at the 201, Caleb Johnson and Loveland. We talked a lot about that. Cam Scatabo, whatever you want to say. This guy is absolutely flying up boards lately. He can catch. He looks good doing it. The question is, what's the role, and is he going to be able to consistently get volume? We'll see. Trey Harris and Jalen Knoll. Jalen Milrow at the 2-7. I like him in the middle of round 2, middle to late round 2. He's a project. You're going to have to wait. Most likely, but we'll see where he lands. Some people are saying Pittsburgh able to grab him at any point. Maybe they sign Rodgers or whatever. That looks like it's a good ramp up. I don't know how that works with a mentor like Rodgers, but Jalen Milrow needs time to develop. And then you see Gordon, Neal, Arroyo, and Jaden Higgins. For myself here at the 112, or 212 rather, I got a couple of guys who fell to me who I like, and they are running backs. I really like Dylan Sampson. I think he's a great inside runner. I've talked about him plenty, but I'm going to go ahead and take RJ, the Mr. Bowling Ball himself, RJ Harvey. I just think his athleticism is freaky good. He's got a really good chance if he lands in a good spot. The question for him is draft capital. How do you feel about Harvey and any of these other second round picks, Dave?
Man, there's a lot of sleeper running backs to like in this range, and some of them are going to get pushed up once they get draft capital and landing spots, and we're going to see those guys be the preferred late second round picks, maybe even get pushed up into mid early second.
For sure.
But there is a lot of guys to like. You look at Harvey. I mean, there's more guys: Martinez, DJ Giddens, Rashard Smith, Bishop Tootin. Like I'm organizing my board. I got to move Tootin up because I got to get my queue from sleeper to match my rankings, which is a little bit of a struggle right now. Some of these guys are really low. So that is one benefit to doing the NFL, your rookie draft pre-NFL draft, because not only do you have a chance to get guys if you're ahead of the curve on like researching where they're going to get drafted in the actual NFL draft, but there's just guys who I think even consensus-wise are higher, but they're just not reflected in the sleeper rankings. Like Tootin has been pushed way up. He's way down, like in here. So
yeah, ADP still normalizing. So as you make your third round pick, we'll just have a look at the third round. Isaiah Bond at the 301. Dylan Sampson, absolutely love him at the 302. Jalen Royals, he's a darling for some here in the mid to early third round. He keeps creeping up, and Mason Taylor, son of course of Jason Taylor, keeps creeping up with his freaky athleticism. Hard to understand where he gets that from. And then Bashal Tootin, as you mentioned, with about 20 seconds on the clock here. David, what are you thinking at the 306?
I could go a few different players here because, again, draft capital landing spot's going to be huge. I'm between Fannin, Damian Martinez. I think you could go Iomanor. DJ Giddens, another one who, could be a guy. I'm going to go Fannin just because I want to, I still want to be in on Harold Fannin Jr., especially in a mid-third round rookie pick. I think the upside's still there. He's comps kind of to somewhere on the Jonnu Smith, Isaiah Likely spectrum to me. A little bit better athlete than Likely, a little bit worse than Jonnu. But everything about this guy's profile is good other than his speed. Like, it's just obviously the production is unbelievable. This guy broke records. Not only did he break production records in terms of just receiving yards by a tight end in a single season, but he was also really good after the catch. He is the first tight end in PFF history to have 30 plus broken tackles on receptions in a season. So he was just really good after the catch. So you look at the combine, he still performed well in the 3-cone. I believe his shuttle time was decent. So we don't have all bad numbers on him. He's just a little bit average speed and a little bit smaller. But the upside for this guy, again, is a guy like Jonnu Smith, where we saw it just turned into a guy who can break tackles, a guy who can be used as, like a big slot wide receiver, a guy who could potentially catch, 75 plus receptions in a season. So I still, especially in a tight end premium, if I can get that in the 3rd round, again, a guy like Martinez who went right after, that's another guy who I would have picked. I think he's a great sleeper running back in this class. He could go higher than people think in the NFL draft terms of this guy posted a 90 plus PFF rushing grade twice. This guy was above 6 yards per attempt every season, multiple seasons above 4 yards after contact per attempt. So Damian Martinez, another pick that I really love in that mid-3rd round there.
Yeah, agree with that. And he's just he's looked so good, and the value on him, depending on where he's taken, of course, should be excellent if you're able to get him there. You see the way the rest of this 3rd round is shaping up. As we wait for some of these picks here, David, let's just talk a little bit more about tight end and put a bow on it. We obviously have Warren and Loveland, however you order them at the top. Consensus says Warren, but I've heard some people say Loveland. That's fine. Tight end 3, gun to your head. Who are you taking?
Gun to my head, I think it's still Harold Fannin Jr. Mason Taylor is going to get drafted higher. That's almost for sure, without a doubt. So you can, I would say, put him in the same tier as Fannin, arguably ahead of Fannin. Same with Arroyo. I think Arroyo as well. He's probably going to get drafted higher than Fannin.
Sure.
But I'm not sure these guys have significantly higher upside than Fannin, and they just don't have the same pros in terms of production. Taylor did test decently well at his pro day, especially I think put like 28 bench reps, which is a little surprising to me. But he's not super fast, but I think he ran like mid 4.6s, which is good. So Taylor kind of surprised me as an athlete. I might end up putting him above Fannin. This is not a great gun to your head answer.
Yeah, you're dead. It's over for you, David. I love it. I love it, man. But let's look at, listen, I'm not sure. I go Arroyo, so I'm on the other end of the spectrum. It's always hard to parse out, especially when you have a top quarterback, if the production is due to the quarterback or if it's due to the guy himself. But I like the way that Arroyo looks on tape. But of course, Taylor and Fannin are all part of the discussion. And look, Gunnar Helm, he did all the drills, but really messed up his foot. Legitimate pictures afterwards, it looked like. Maybe Helm is a guy who sees the field because he can block, and then he becomes this Pat Freiermuth, always on the field, potentially gets you enough to be productive in the NFL. Let's take a look at the end of the 3rd round. You mentioned Martinez at 307. We have Restrepo, Ayo Minor, Kyle Williams, DJ Giddens, who was sniped for me. So I went Jack Besh. If you look at the end of the 3rd, well, actually, we'll let you pick here first, and then we'll break it all down later. You're on the clock here with 30 seconds. So at the 4:06, David, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm happy because my queue started going down, and I'm like, I got one left with one pick ahead of me. If he picks it, I'm going to have to start scrambling to find somebody who's hiding in the sleeper rankings. I got a little bit lost with the queue there while we were talking. But I do have one guy left who I want to pick here, who I think, especially if I can get him in the 4th round, it's a guy who I want to take, and that's going to be Torrey Horton, who I think is a little bit of a sleeper wide receiver. Not too many people are talking about him, but I'm seeing him kind of get mocked in that 3rd to 4th round range, potentially round 3. He tested really well at the combine, even coming off of, I believe, knee surgery. He ran a 4.41 and posted a 37.5-inch vertical. So he's a little bit lankier. He's like 6'2", 198. So he is a little bit tall, fast, and he was productive as a true freshman, third on his team in receiving yards and touchdowns at Nevada. He was really good in his best season. He was he was fifth in receptions in 2023. He had 96 receptions for 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. So top 5 in the NCAA in receptions. Productive early, again, productive for 2 different programs. Good athlete. We'll see. Eventually, his reception perception profile will come out way once we get down to. Hopefully, he's included. But he's a guy I like as well, especially in the 4th round, throwing a dart right now. I'm hoping to get a guy who's drafted in round 3, maybe round 4. I don't want to be throwing darts at guys who are going to be like around 6, 7 picks, as much those are a lot less likely to hit. So I think Horton's a good pick in that range.
Yeah, I love it. And Horton keeps creeping up as well. He went undrafted for a majority of March when we were doing these rookie mocks. And then toward the end, he started creeping into the end of the 4th round. Now you see him mid-4th. I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, if he gets the capital we expect, for him to push up into the late or mid-3rd, depending on where everybody lands. The guy seems like he's got potential. But as you referenced, a lot of these guys are darts at this stage of the game. If we look again at the back of the 3rd, as I mentioned, or the 4th, we got Taj Brooks, Savion Williams, Cordell Patterson 2.0, right? Rashard Smith, Terrence Ferguson, the tight end darling of some, Marcus Yarns, Torrey Horton, Isaac Tesla, don't call me Tesla, and Quinn Ewers. What do you think about this kind of group of 12 players from Restrepo all the way through to Ewers? Is there any values that you see here outside of Horton, who we already talked about?
I like Ferguson as a tight end prospect. Honestly, I think, there are going to be some people who could argue he should be in the Arroyo, Taylor, Fandon tier. I mean, he was productive early in his career. He was efficient. He hits a lot of the thresholds I look for. He comes close to them. So he looks like a clean prospect to me. Again, the draft capital is going to be a big one. But I like Ferguson. Rashad Smith, I think he's the one that stands out to me in that at that 4-3. I think I kind of have him right there with Damian Martinez. I saw Angelo Analysis, if you guys follow him, he's another guy who I love. Like to have him on my podcast as well. He said he's got a 2nd-round grade on Smith. So he's kind of a converted wide receiver, but really good athlete. He was in the 4.3s for his 40. Not a great vertical or broad jump, so more like straight line speed. Not great yards after contact numbers. So I'm not sure he's going to be a high volume rusher. I've seen him comp to this year's Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy is a little bit thicker, was a much better tackle breaker. So I don't really see that comp too much, but I do think he's a guy who could come in and be somebody's 3rd down back, potentially be, I don't want to say Rashad White, but Rashad White is a guy who's kind of another like a receiving back. I think White's a little bit bigger than Smith as well, but sometimes you see these guys end up as the number 1 running back just kind of de facto because of their skills as a receiver, pass blocker, and then the depth chart just opens ahead of them, even if they might not be a high volume rusher. So I think he's got 3 down upside, even though he projects more as a committee running back. I think another guy who's not even drafted, Tej Johnson, who to me is could be this year's Tank Dell. You look at, again, PFF grading is not everybody cares about it. But you look at Puka Nacua, he's a guy who you look at his college profile and some stuff that stands out where his yards per route run and his PFF grading. Puka was PFF's 2nd highest graded wide receiver in 2022 in the NCAA. Who was number 1? It's Tej Johnson. So you look at sleepers, Tej Johnson not posting 90 plus PFF grades. He's really high yards per route run, multiple seasons, multiple teams, Troy, Oregon. And then you look at the combine, right? He obviously has like a 2nd percentile speed score where he ran 4.5 140 at 112 pounds soaking wet with a life jacket on, like a vest on. But again, Tank Dell was sub 170 pounds too, I believe. And you look at some of the other numbers from the combine, Tej Johnson's shuttle time, his 3-cone, those were elite. He was really good. He was top of class. So he's got really good stop-start quickness. He could be a team's starting slot wide receiver. And I think could be potentially a guy who catches 50 plus receptions as a rookie. And everybody goes, oh, wow, he's actually good. The NFL does have a place for small players. Again, he could go the way of Tank Dell and you go, okay, maybe not, but I do think you could see kind of a guy go from, okay, he's absolutely free. I'm taking him as a waiver addition after the draft to a guy who could actually be, I can throw him into my third flex spot if I need to. So we'll see about Tez Johnson. There's so many positives that's like, all right, what happens if the weight isn't completely taking him out of the league? What happens if he does have a role?
Yeah, I love that. And professional segue from you. Let's talk about the guys that Eric references here and some other guys who didn't get drafted. Ty Felton, Raheem Sanders, Hunter. We got Tez, who you've been opining for the last 2 minutes, which, Tez was a darling a couple of, months ago, and now really has fallen off because of that testing and the size. You see some other names. Jordan James is a big riser lately. Jaden Blue, some people love. Woody Marks. All right, so there's lots of names here. Donovan Edwards, Ricky White. Do you have any? LaQuint Allen is still here. Do you have any guys that you're surprised didn't get drafted beyond Tez?
I think you just named them all. I think the only guy you probably
right.
didn't name that's like I have ranked who is not.
Is it Etienne?
I think it's Taj Brooks and Etienne. And Taj Brooks, you could argue them there. Well, again, draft capital is going to be so big and landing spot for these rookie running backs. You're just kind of throwing darts pre-draft.
Absolutely. Let's get to some of these questions before we run through the draft. Just a couple of quick points here, if I can get back to the beginning of the draft and find them. All right. First one is from Jamie. Where do you think Cam Ward, this is a big discussion on Twitter over the last 48 hours, Cam Ward in reference to last year's draft class, we had all of those quarterbacks come out and really perform, if not get injured with JJ McCarthy. It looks like it has the potential to be one of the great quarterback classes if those guys can continue their trajectory. But now Cam Ward is our consensus QB1 in most cases. Where do you think he stacks up against last year's class?
Well, he's going to be below Caleb Williams and Jane Daniels, definitely below Marvin Neighbors, Brock Bowers. I think Odunze, it's kind of where you start to kind of have a conversation. I would definitely have him below Drake May as well.
Yep.
But I think Odunze, JJ McCarthy, like that range around, was that 107, 108. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where we're talking. I don't think he's going to be the 102 at all or close to it in last year's class.
Better than Bo Nix?
Yes. We're talking about first overall. Again, Nix was a fifth-year player who had some blemishes in his early career as well. Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess you could say similar to Ward. I would say he was worse than Ward early in his career. Ward was, started a little bit better at his first couple of seasons, whereas Bo Nix was not really good at Auburn. But yeah, he would be better than Bo Nix. I think you look at kind of the class before maybe where Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, those guys were going as top 4 picks. Again, Ward would have been right there, I think probably after Bryce, ahead of Richardson, maybe right behind Richardson, because again, Richardson, we were going crazy over that rushing upside. So he was a top 4 pick as well.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't think he's going to be the 102.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think the conversation is it Bo Nix or Cam Ward. A lot of people have Bo Nix ahead, but that probably wasn't the case, at
people
this
hated Bo Nix as a prospect. That is the most hindsight take ever.
Yes, sir.
He was falling to the mid-second round in some drafts. People did not like Bo Nix at all. I had to argue that he was even good at Oregon. People were like, "Oh, Bo Nix is never." I'm like, well, he was actually very highly productive. Like you look at his touchdown to interception ratio, PFF passing rate. Oh, he's a screen merchant. Well, he actually was really good on deep passes at Oregon as well. Yeah. So it was like I had to argue that even people didn't even want to acknowledge his success at Oregon. They hated him so much.
Well, obviously, he created Tez Johnson. So there we go. It comes full circle. Let's take a look at TreVeyon Henderson, 6.4 yards per carry in college. He's a beast. I saw an argument earlier today, just in a group chat, which I thought was interesting, but I disagreed with, is that Henderson, if he's so good and he's worthy of, RB3, RB4 in this class, then why did Ohio State have to bring in Judkins to kind of spell him? He should be able to carry the load. That was the argument. What do you think about that and where Henderson might fit in the NFL?
I mean, there's just some teams that are power programs, and that's what they do. Like, why did Georgia have Todd Gurley and Nick Chubb and DeAndre Swift? Because they're a power program, and that's what they do. They bring in the best players, and they try to win national championships. That's how college football works sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And they did, right? So it's hard to argue that. And Henderson, incredibly efficient. Top 12 dynasty. I love the spiciness, Jamie. Here's one about Tet from SPB. I understand the concern, but dropping to the 107 is a bit much. I agree. He's been falling in some mocks. It's interesting to see, is it Tet or Tyler Warren? Is it Tet or RB3, which in this draft is TreVeyon Henderson, and then Travis Hunter creeping up. What do you think about the Tet value if he ends up at 107?
I have no argument against people who feel he's a value there. That's 100% valid argument, and I feel the same way. You could argue Ted as high as 102. You could argue Henderson as high as 102. You could argue Tyler Warren as high as 102. You could argue Travis Hunter 102. You could argue Marion Hampton 102. So whichever guy you get at 107, you're gonna be like, hell yeah, I got the 102. You're gonna feel good about that pick.
Yeah. And then conversely, you can also take your 102 and then trade it for like a 110 and get a bunch on top and probably end up with the same guy. No?
We'll see about 110. If you're a Luther Burden fan like me, then you'll be happy with that. But again, you do take some risk. Like, it depends again, how do you feel about Quinshon Judkins? Especially these quarterbacks. Like, if you're not a fan of these quarterbacks, you might not want to go all the way back to 110. You might want to kind of try and go back to 108 maybe. But again, it depends on your opinions on certain players here. But we'll see. You got to really hope these landing spots kind of force people to want to move up a little bit, because right now nobody wants to trade up. Everybody's in the same boat. Oh, let's trade back. Oh, let's trade back. But that will change a little bit once there's the perfect landing spot kind of player that people want to come up for, hopefully. But we'll see, because right now it's not looking like anybody's like, oh, I can't wait to trade up from 107 to 102. That's certainly not the sentiment in the market right now.
Agree. I'm going to give you 1 minute to have a look before I ask you to respond. But can you just take a look at the board and see if there's a full draft from someone that you really like, just in terms of the values or the players that they got? As you take a look and figure that out, let's just take a look at a few more comments. So Mike in the chat said Brashard Smith in the 4th, having the time of his life. Not a bad value, and we already talked about that. Jamie talking about Bo Nix at the 111. That was a really good spot for him. Ended up being, even though, like you said, you could have gotten him in the 2nd round last year. And of course, you tuned into the show for the hard-hitting analysis. Zach Thomas is married to Jason Taylor's sister, so that would make him Mason Taylor's uncle-in-law. Maybe there's some sort of bloodlines through osmosis going on there for Mason Taylor, but certainly it doesn't hurt to be Jason Taylor's son. So as we get into it here, David, what are you thinking about 1 or 2 here of your favorite drafts?
There's one team which stands out to me. That would be Mike M. I think his team he had the best draft. I think I like his team better than mine. He sniped a couple of my guys. So Loveland at 203, that's a steal to me. He's a guy who is, I would say, arguably 110. He's in that same tier, or at least 111. I think he's a 1st-round pick, especially in tight end premium. And we talk about Jalen Royals, 303. I really like that. I think he's the same tier as Trey Harris, Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins. He's a guy who's a 2nd-round pick to me. Brashard Smith in the 4th round. Again, we highlighted that before. I think that's a steal. So I was hoping Royals was going to fall to 306 there. And again, Brashard Smith, I would have liked him to fall to 406. So I think Mike had a great draft.
Love that. Love Mike's draft. And we're going to shout out a few other people here. Spencer at the 107. He got Tet at value. Jalen Milroe, if he pans out in the mid-2nd, is nice. Damian Martinez, who we've been talking about a little bit here as well. And Isaac, don't call me Tesla, is, wrapping it up here as a dart throw. Not too bad. I really like that, but obviously some high risk with Milroe in the second. We've got Gary at the 111 with Sanders' value is insane. Sanders needs to be a few spots up, I think, because I think he's going to be a top 5 pick, pretty much locked in at this point. Someone's going to come up, in my opinion, to take him. Then you got Jaden Higgins at the 211. The back of the second for Higgins is a little crazy. DJ Giddens, who you were professing your love for and who pretty much everyone is. The athleticism is crazy. He looks good. And then Tyler Shuck, who, look, he's 25. I think he's Canadian, or at least he played in Canada. All right. This guy is, kind of this, is he QB 5? Does he have a chance to be drafted in the NFL? We will see where he goes and if he gets a chance at all. And then, of course, at the, who's got it? Oh, Easy Ewok at the 104. Travis Hunter, of course, is he playing wide receiver? We certainly hope so for fantasy. Cam Scatabo, I think at the 2-4, you could pick one or two other guys, maybe at running back, but I don't mind the value there and taking the shot on him. And then those two highly hyped up for good reason tight ends there in tight end premium, Mason Taylor in the 3rd and Terrence Ferguson in the 4th. Really good value at the end of the draft with some kind of really nice upside in the beginning of the draft. So everyone here had a nice draft, but I particularly like those. I will ask you this, David, before we sign off here. Looking at the end of this draft, and I took Kyle McCord over ETN just to make sure that we got 5 quarterbacks at the very end of the draft. Are any of these guys doing it for you in terms of, I'm going to take a dart throw in the 4th and draft one of these quarterbacks?
No, I'll draft a running back instead. I think they have much better paths to getting on the field.
Yep.
Much better paths to becoming starters down the road. I don't see any of these guys as, I mean, Ewers is the one who could potentially get drafted in the 2nd round of the NFL draft. Everybody hates him. Nobody actually likes him. I haven't met a Quinn Ewers fan in since ever. But if you're going to throw your last pick in the 4th round of this quarterback draft in the 2nd round of the NFL draft, you could do worse than that.
Yeah. And
nobody liked Bo Nix either. I mean, sometimes we're just wrong. Sometimes the NFL's right and we're stupid. That's just how it works sometimes.
Yeah. And listen, if you don't like a guy who had to move from Ohio State to Syracuse to get Oronde Gadsden a ridiculous number of yardage and break records, then I don't know how to help you. Kyle McCord in the 4th round. Why the hell not? So that's going to wrap our draft. Oh, I do have one more question because I am asking this of everyone who comes on the show, David. I did a study over the last couple of weeks, posted on Reddit. It's actually coming out this week on Twitter as well, which is just basically looking at all of the late round players drafted in the NFL draft by position. Of course, to kind of normalize the sample a little bit, we had to skew the rounds drafted. So it was running backs drafted from rounds 5 through 7, wide receivers from 4 through 7, and then QB and tight end from rounds 3 through 7, just because the talent gets so terrible, in those rounds. Basically, there's really no statistical correlation here between guys drafted in those rounds and fantasy success. It roughly ends up being about 2% of those guys have reasonable spots on your dynasty roster, and it does not mean that they are productive in that sense as well. So, guys who are drafted in the later rounds, like you mentioned, do you prefer to just take your shots on running backs because they have the easiest pathway to playing time? Or are you just kind of going to grab the guy who you think is hyper athletic and the guy who can be the outlier from those later rounds?
Yeah, that's really where I'm leaning into my player takes. And I'm going after the guys who intrigue me. So I don't really care too much about position. But again, if it's a quarterback, like who I think that's the hardest one because I think quarterbacks have the lowest injury rate. And most of these guys are not even going to be 2nd string quarterbacks. They're going to be 3rd, maybe even practice squad players. So they might not even be on the game day roster. So that's, for me, it's tougher to throw a dart because you just know you're going to churn that guy out in the first couple of weeks. He's not going to stick. And again, it's likely with the running backs too. But I would say I kind of avoid the quarterbacks. But other than like running back, wide receiver, tight end, I don't really care. I want to take shots at the guys that I like.
Yeah. And do you have any other guys other than Horton that you really like in that range? Like if you got to pick another guy other than Horton, maybe a guy who wasn't drafted, is there anyone that you're going after?
Well, to me, we'll see if Horton's there in the 4th round once, the
Yeah.
actual NFL draft. I think he's more of a late 3rd. But I like Ferguson. I like Terrence Ferguson. I think for a tight end, I think he's probably got the highest hit rate out of these picks based on where he's
Sure.
going to get drafted in the NFL draft, based on the production, the athleticism. Like he might be a 3rd round NFL draft pick, and then we're comparing him versus running backs who are going to be 5th, 6th round draft picks. So I think Ferguson's another guy who I think will be worth more after his rookie season than a 4th round rookie draft pick.
Fair.
So I like him as well.
Nice. Love that. And Savion Williams, for real, the last question here. Any chance Savion Williams becomes something, or is this just a shot in the dark?
I mean, there's always a chance, right? You're telling me there's a chance.
Yeah,
There's always a
exactly.
chance,
Exactly.
but I'm not betting on Savion Williams.
Yeah. I think the Cordero Patterson is just a guy who had the great athleticism and fell into the right situation where Arthur Smith and Bill Belichick were crazy enough to try and give him the ball in the backfield. We hope that for Savion Williams, but unfortunately, a lot of these 4th round dart throws here will be special teamers if, maybe get on the field for a small amount of reps. We just hope they are the outliers and they hit. So thank you so much for joining us. We are Adjust the Ranks, of course, presented by the Fantasy Football Universe. We appreciate you joining us here for our 4-round Superflex tight end premium rookie mock draft. We've got a bunch of these going on all off season long. You can see our schedule here and what we have coming up. April 9th is Wednesday, so we welcome JJ Zachariason onto the show. We've got, of course, these guests and a bunch of other great guests coming up throughout the offseason. And we just opened our Discord. That link is in the chat if you want to join us and chat us up and talk all about trades, dynasty strategy, rookies, and how you see them. We got guys who are much smarter than me in that Discord talking about rookies daily. So please jump in, join us, and join our community. We appreciate you joining us. And David, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Anything you want to plug, tell people where they can find you, what you're doing, what's happening, please feel free.
Yeah, I mean, just follow me on Twitter at Guru Fantasy World. No O in World. Got the cap limits. But then again, you can go to the website, gurufantasyworld.com. Have all my making the case threads that I've ever written on there. Have a dictionary on there, more strategy pieces. If you want to get the paywall content, the weekly newsletter, the top 250 dynasty rankings, access to Arcus score, the dynasty trade manifesto, all that good stuff, you can check out the Patreon as well. There are links to that on my Twitter, on my website, so you can check that out as well. Lowest tier is $1 a month if you just want the newsletter. So pretty cheap entry fee if you're just looking for the bare minimum to get actionable content. You're going to get a newsletter every week in season, which is going to highlight risers, fallers, recommended dynasty trades. So you're going to have a big list at the bottom of actual trades that I'm recommending. So that will help kind of get the mind going, get the creative ideas going a little bit. A lot of times, even if you don't like the exact trade, it might kind of send you in the right direction. So I would recommend starting there if you're just looking for the bare minimum.
Absolutely love it. So, David, once again, thank you so much for joining us. And this guy is one of the hardest working guys that you will see on social media, on Twitter, of course, on his website. So please do not be afraid to subscribe, follow, do whatever you got to do to find out what David thinks of these rookies. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. So for this guy, I'm this guy, we're these guys, and we are leaving goodbye.
From the entire Channel 4 News team, I'm Veronica Corningstone.
And I'm Ron Burgundy. Go
Rank
yourself, San Diego.